like to rock, shout, shout, shout. You like to rock, come here. You like to rock, shout, shout, shout. You like to rock, come.
There are some good singers today, but none of them, to me, matches the power of Mahalia.
Come on, children, let's sing about the goodness of the Lord. Come on, children, let's shout all about God's great reward. Get our footsteps every day. Keep us walking in the narrow way. Come on, children, let's sing. Come on, children, let's shout.
And whenever she showed up, Mahalia filled the room.
Oh, let it be, Lord. Oh, dear Lord. Oh, let it be.
It's hard to listen to Mahalia without tears coming to your eyes under any circumstances. I can feel them right now.
Raised in Southern poverty, Mahalia Jackson became one of the most beloved and recognized people of her time. Yet she never forgot her humble roots.
Her childhood wasn't easy. And in those days, blacks didn't have it very easy in the South.
But her singing remained joyful, bringing cynics to tears and lifting the faithful to exaltation. Determined to show white America the authentic soul of gospel, she tackled many challenges.
Up through the walls of Jericho, Lord God in his name. Look on them hard-cut, George away, dancing in my hand. Hallelujah.
If I were to ask a person to name me 2 jazz performers, they could do it. 2 country and western performers. 2 blues, they could do it. If I asked them to name me 2 gospel performers, they would have difficulty. But the one name that they would come up with is Mahalia Jackson.
Her artistry, her dignity when hit by racism, her fight for the less fortunate, all converged in her devotion to a single goal, the celebration of her God. As Woodrow Wilson sat in the White House, suffragettes marched for women's rights to vote. The Wright brothers ushered in the modern age. The Sultan of Swat reinvented America's pastime, and the rules of racial superiority gouged a deep, dark chasm through every street in the land. The only solace offered most blacks came from the church.
Most of our solid citizens and achievers come out of that discipline, so the church is a kind of oasis in the desert.
Into this trying world, a child was born in a dreary New Orleans waterfront shack, her legs so crippled she could not walk.
When I was a little girl down in New Orleans, we lived out by the levee. Now, I was born on Water Street, and then the levee banked the Mississippi River.
Her grandfather was a plantation slave. Her impoverished mother, Charity, shared a single room with her own 4 sisters. Her father, Reverend Johnny, lived across town. He worked the docks by day, cut hair at night, and spent his weekends preaching the gospel. A doctor for the crippled Mahalia was out of the question. All they had was prayer and massage. But gradually her little bones straightened out. When Mahalia was 5, her mother died, and Mahalia's Aunt Duke took charge of the motherless child. The young nation was celebrating its victory in World War I, and its new status as a wealthy powerhouse about to launch itself into the frothy pleasures of the roaring 20s. For blacks, it was a different world altogether, and her aunt instilled in young Mahalia practical traits that would last a lifetime. A rare standard of perfection in her work, and a personal and deep devotion to the teachings of Jesus. It helped her bear the weight of poverty that held her and those around her down.
The houses were pretty shabby, and you could be in the house and you could see the sun outside. If it rained, it would rain inside. And that condition made me feel very sad all the time.
Poverty was a byproduct because it was illegal to use the public accommodations, the toilets. It was illegal to drink water. It was illegal to attempt to vote. It was illegal to stay in the house of your choice. It was illegal to go to the school closest to you.
Rather than defeating her, deprivation strengthened her resolve. A frequent babysitter for wealthy white families, Mahalia dreamed of better times, and she sought comfort and joy in the church.
Mahalia was a Baptist. He started singing at the age of 4, "Hand me down my silver trumpet, Lord." And she had a head full of hair. And when she would shake, that hair would just fly all over. The people liked this. She knew that it was getting a reaction.
Mahalia's inspiration to sing that way came from several other sources. The haunting work songs of the Negro dock workers, the wailing of Bessie Smith's forbidden blues records that she would secretly listen to, and most of all, a unique church right next door. Wild Pentecostals captivated her with their full-blast worship.
Pentecostal church in the black community at that time was a butt of every joke that you could get. People were embarrassed by this shouting and this speaking in other tongues and this slobbering at the mouth and this loud singing.
The movement was brand new, just out of California, and unlike the somber, yearning Baptists beseeching deliverance from a world of suffering and injustice, they followed the Bible's command to make a joyful noise unto the Lord. So she sang it as she felt it, transmitting the heartbeat of God in a way that no singer had done before, and so startling the Baptist elders that she was sometimes asked to leave the building.
And she would say, well, this is the way I'm going to sing it. I ain't going to sing it like they sing. This is the way I sing.
Up to the walls of Jericho, one rod in his tank. Some brought him hard cotton, George to wear. That is in my hand. Hallelujah. That's with the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. That's with the battle of Jericho. There's a wall came tumbling down.
Besides singing, she enjoyed few pleasures. She ended her formal education while still in grade school in order to help out around the house.
What was I going to try to learn for down there? It was no work for me. If I'd have got a chance to go to college, there was nothing for me to do but still push the white people's buggy, their babies, and clean their babies and clean their house.
Mahalia was 14 when a vision came to her. Jesus was walking across a giant green meadow. The Lord told me to open my mouth in his name, she would often testify. She saw no reason to confine her new mission to New Orleans, but her aunt said no to the young girl who could see her entire life stretched out before her and going nowhere. A rare chance to escape her poverty appeared one day in the form of her visiting cousins. They sang for the legendary blues artist, Ma Rainey. They made a spectacular offer. Come sing jazz with us and make yourself some money. But with no regrets, she declined the opportunity, consigning herself to many more years of hand-to-mouth living. Yet the recognition of these professionals gave her confidence. Her singing started drawing notice across Louisiana, but there was no such thing as a professional gospel singer. So she hoped to become a registered nurse.
There weren't many of us that lived too well, and I used to dream of living better. I've always been a child that thought way in the beyond of the future, but I had this feeling that I could live better.
It was an extended family. Her mother and all of her mother's sisters created the family. Some lived in Chicago, some lived in New Orleans. And as a matter of fact, during those days, you could say to your sister, "Give me that child."
Mahalia longed to go north, joining the wave of blacks migrating to Chicago for a better life. And Duke warned her that gangsters controlled the Negro streets of Chicago and were very dangerous for a young, unexperienced girl. But at 15, Mahalia bravely boarded the train for her 3-day journey to the Promised Land. Her Aunt Hannah met her at Chicago's giant train station, where the girl faced the first of many disorienting changes. She observed a black woman, her aunt, request and immediately received the services of a white man, the cab driver who drove them home. She planned to re-enter school and then pursue her nurse's training.
When she first came to Chicago, she did what was called day's work. That is to say, she went to homes and cleaned homes by the day.
She said that what really sustained her through all the tribulations of doing menial jobs was her faith.
Her Aunt Hannah took her to church with her. She starts up this song, and everybody looks around at this little girl singing, and they're wondering, what is wrong with her? Well, she sang a couple of choruses, and when no one joined in with her, she stopped, but she said she didn't go back to that church anymore.
Just a few blocks from home was another church, Greater Salem Baptist, whose welcoming arms soon became the young immigrant's second home several nights a week. Chicago boomed with prosperity. Prohibition added tension and violence to the mix, but blacks remained subjugated. There was no mingling of cultures, and Greater Salem Baptist Church became the nucleus of her world. She quickly found herself in the church's youthful choral group, the Johnson Singers.
Now we're talking about a 16-year-old girl. She began to be called upon to sing solos at this church, to sing solos at that church, to sing at this funeral, to open up this civic program.
He and the Johnson Singers, they would sing a song. In the rollers call up yonder, it used to be sung in the traditional way. When the rollers call up yonder, when the rollers call up yonder, I'll be there. And then the Johnson Singers, he would turn it around and say, when the rollers call up yonder, gonna be yonder, I'll be there. When the rollers call up yonder, Lord, up yonder, I'll be there. They would put that rhythm to it. And that's what made it so fascinating in the church.
When you mix the natural New Orleans music, her Baptist bringing, and this sanctified church, you find that this is beginning to make her as a singer. I don't think we would have had that had she been brought up, for example, in Chicago.
At 16, Mahalia was now a professional. On a good night, the group could pull in as much as a respectable $1.50. Advised to get formal voice training, Mahalia engaged an instructor of music for the considerable sum of $4. He interrupted her singing as too undignified, so she walked out. Even as a teenage artist, Mahalia was listening to only one guide, her heart.
My man's got a heart like a rock cast in the sea.
Although the music of Bessie Smith captivated Mahalia, she never wanted to sing the blues.
I always loved to hear Bessie Smith moan. She said, that's when you hear me moan in these songs. So she said, because I get something from hearing her moan. It takes me back to my childhood.
Can you imagine what kind of a blues singer she would have been? My God, she'd have been the most tremendous blues singer of all time, outstripped Bessie Smith.
That type of music wasn't even accepted by the better thinking people at that particular time, because they call that kind of music, when I was a child, indecent music. Music that would be played for common people and the honky-tonks in the saloons.
Another product of the vibrant Southern music scene had also moved to Chicago. One day he stopped in at Mahalia's church, and that visit would change her life.
The great gospel writer, Professor Thomas Dorsey, who once upon a time played the blues. He was accompanist of Ma Rainey, the teacher of Bessie Smith. And then he was saved after his wife, and he became a writer of gospel music.
Thomas Dorsey knew that the higher echelon of blacks bought blues albums, not spirituals, but he wanted to sell the gospel. I've heard many of them try to sound like Mahalia, said Dorsey, but nobody could imitate her.
The voice was glorious. The breath control was out of this world. The way she would build a song from the beginning to the very end, and you could almost see a transformation in her face.
The key to Mahalia was very simple, Dorsey would say later. She enjoyed her religion. Mahalia would sing Dorsey's songs on street corners, a sales technique called demonstrating. To catch and hold the passers-by, Mahalia developed several singing techniques.
Mahalia Jackson had a habit of combining what we call wandering couplets or wandering quatrains into songs to strengthen them, to give them strength. For example, she sings, he's got the whole world, and now that, he's got the little bitty baby. That's the next chorus. He's got you and me, brother. But to give it variety, she said, if religion could be bought on this whole wide world, he's got the whole world in his hands. And then she'd say something else, and then she'd come back. And in that way, she could stretch a song.
If religion was a thing that money could buy, the poor die. Oh, wide world in your head. But I'm not worried. You got this great big world in your hand. You've got this great big world.
By age 20, Mahalia was a fixture on the black church circuit. She and Dorsey earned only enough to eat and travel to the next stop. Yet one day, Mahalia still felt the urge to help someone less fortunate.
In 1934, I met Mahalia Jackson. She used to come to Greenville, Mississippi to run revivals. And there she saw me as a boy in the church, beating the tambourine and singing. And somehow she just taken to me. I was in a house that I shouldn't have been in a house of ill repute. And she was concerned about my well-being down there. She came back to Chicago after the revival and told my aunt. And my aunt came down, and then my aunt brought me back to Chicago. And I rejoined Mahalia again.
In 1936, aged 24, she herself remained without a companion until she met the tall, handsome Ike Huckenhull, who was a graduate of Fisk and Tuskegee. His culture and sophistication impressed the young woman, who felt insecure about her own lack of education. Ike was trained as a chemist, but in these post-Depression years, he could find work only as a mailman. Despite a background so utterly different from hers, or perhaps because of it, Mahalia fell deeply in love. Ike's mother ran a cosmetics business that catered to blacks, and the young couple found themselves immersed in it.
Well, she wasn't educated, but she was a businesswoman. She had that mother wit.
Mahalia was very shrewd, and I assume she was a pretty tough businesswoman, too. She learned to be that. She had to, of necessity.
The Great Depression staggered white Americans and drove already desperate blacks into dire poverty. Mahalia clung to her church.
She was always crazy about the minister. The minister could ask her to do anything, and she would be willing to do it. She always put him first, because the minister was the only one could help you. In the court, he'd go to court and plead for you, because we had no black lawyers.
Chicago preachers needed anything to help, and Mahalia's revivals became a much sought-after event.
you take a collection, for example, and you have $95, you would say, we need $5 more, and as soon as you give us the $5, Mahalia Jackson will come and sing. And they would hold off Mahalia until they got a certain amount of money.
Come on, children, and sing. Come on, children, and shout. Come the Lord to fight that for the sound. None like him without no doubt. Come on, children, and sing. Oh, goodness of the Lord. Hallelujah. Come on, children, and sing. For the goodness of the Lord. Come on, children, and shout. All about God's great reward. Down footsteps every day. Keep me walking in your narrow way. Come on, children, and sing. Come on, children, and shout. To fight your head for the sound. There's none like you without a doubt. Come on, children, and sing. Oh, the goodness. Oh,
Her singing invariably drove audiences wild.
And all of a sudden, you've made a connection, something kicks in, and then listeners get happy. Now, let me explain what getting happy is. It is an ecstatic relationship to singing, preaching, praying, or even just thinking, so that you naturally start to sway a little bit, because the dance cannot be separated from the music.
come on, children, let's sing. Come on, children, let's shout. How the Lord Almighty has brought us out, and there's none like him without a doubt. Come on, children, let's sing. Oh, the goodness.
It is the basic way that I sang today, from hearing the way the preacher would sort of sing in would preach in a cry, in a moan, would shout sort of like in a chant way, a groaning sound.
Mahalia sang with the whole being, the whole body, and she walked as she sang, and she'd walk off the stage into the congregation, and you know, the shaking of the hands is still singing and moving, and so it becomes a we experience rather than an I.
Preachers would say, you know, Mahalia is all right, but she's switching in the pulpit and the people are talking, so we got to put a robe on Mahalia.
Hallelujah. Elijah rock, shout, shout, shout. Elijah rock, come here. Elijah rock, shout, shout, shout. Elijah rock, come here. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Help me, Lord, have mercy. John talked about him. Spoke of the 7 feet. Something around the Sharon. Other than the Prince of Peace. I can tell everybody he's been a rock in the shelter. Hallelujah. Elijah rock, shout, shout, shout. Elijah rock, come here. Elijah rock, shout, shout, shout. Elijah rock, I'm coming up, Lord.
Now, they always had a problem with Mahalia. Mahalia was what was called a full-bodied woman. And if she moved a little bit, this body would shake, and people objected to that. They associated it with the nightclubs. They associated it with jazz.
The jazz music I knew all about. King Oliver, I don't know him too well, but I've heard him play on the trucks. I heard him before Louis Armstrong left and come up to Chicago.
I covered the one front. I'm watching the sea, 'cause the one I love soon come back to me. I covered the world.
She felt it her mission to take the beat from the nightclubs back to the church.
And I'm covered by. Cut it up from everyday shop. They're on their way to the great carnation. Cut it from the north, south, east, and west. They're on their way to a land of rest. And then we're gonna join the heavenly choir. You know we're gonna sing and never get tired. And then we're gonna sing somewhere around God on down. And then we're gonna shout all our trouble over. You know we got to thank God.
But there was no money to be had in gospel. The voice of a black devotee did not speak to elite blacks and almost no whites. They did not know of Mahalia or any other notable gospel singers. The only ones who liked her music were far too poor to buy her records, so producers had no reason to invest in her. But someone came along who believed in that market and that dream for Mahalia. That someone was Ink Williams, head of Decca's Race Records division. A member of Mahalia's congregation brought Williams to her church, where he saw Mahalia singing make people cry. Mahalia knew that the nationwide power of Decca could skyrocket her from street singing to the top. Decca artists included the legendary Louis Armstrong and many other heavyweights. Her debut for Decca, God's Gonna Separate the Wheat from the Tares, was one of her favorites. Her entire family journeyed to a forbidden place, a tavern, to hear Mahalia's familiar voice floating from the jukebox. People wept. Across the country, the reaction surprised both Decca and Mahalia. The record flopped. Mahalia's confidence lagged. Decca insisted she switch to blues or jazz, and Mahalia again refused to sing what she called indecent music.
It's my delight doing things right 4 or 5 times. Now maybe I'll try, and maybe I'll cry. But if I'll die, I'm going to try to do it 4 or 5 times. I said 4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 times. Now he's my king.
Gospel singers like Rosetta Tharpe and Mahalia's idol, Clara Ward, had switched to the more lucrative world of blues and jazz, but Mahalia would not. She fought off the rejection and plunged back into her cosmetics business. By 1938, she no longer sang with the Johnson Singers, and her recording career was going nowhere. Her refusal to go commercial frustrated her more practical husband. Their marriage grew strained.
He was a racehorse man. This she never liked. And he threw away a lot of money on racehorses. She'd bring him to church, but he wouldn't really join and be a member affiliated with the church as other members would be.
It was a difficult time for Mahalia Jackson. The great artist, wanting to perform and in her prime, would not enter a recording studio again for 7 years. Because her recording career remained grounded, Mahalia decided once again to spread her gospel sound one concert at a time.
I was 16 and my brother was 17. As we came into Nashville, we saw signs all over town. Concert tonight, Mahalia Jackson and the Ward Singers. We were so excited. We went backstage, introduced ourselves, asked if we could sing a song on the program before the Ward Singers and Mahalia came on. Well, this was the fashion. It was a much smaller world, a much safer world. She said yes. She liked our singing. At the end of the program, she said, if you boys are ever in Chicago, here's my address. Come by and see me.
As it had before, her name on a black theater marquee guaranteed standing room only. But despite her popularity, the lonesome roads of the next engagement lay strewn with familiar barriers.
Mahalia was a very strong person on the subject of race and the prejudice that she had suffered all through her life.
Mahalia was a political person, not the active, marching down the street kind of person. but she felt very strongly from her travels, having to sometimes drive all night because there were no hotels in certain parts of the United States that would accommodate black people for sleeping.
TOBA circuit, theater, something of known as tough on black artists was the phrase for it years ago.
On top of the constant threats and indignities of a segregated life, money remained a huge problem. Ike Hockenhall still seethed over her refusal to go commercial, or to even let him manage her present career of church tours. Tiring of his anger towards her and his increased devotion to liquor and horses, Mahalia finally divorced him.
And everything seems to go wrong. All that we built up is crushed. And we feel that we have no one to help us.
Mahalia Jackson was alone in a crowd of faces, traveling the circuit, eking out a living. Meanwhile, a war raged on in Europe, and black American soldiers granted the freedom to fight in bloody World War II trenches were returning home to find their own fight for freedom had all but stalled. Now in her mid-30s, Mahalia felt equally frustrated that her life was going nowhere. But a small record label named Apollo was releasing every sort of world ethnic music they could record and staying content with modest sales. With little to lose, Mahalia agreed to step into their studios. She sang a song, "Move On Up a Little Higher," and her world would soon change.
What we get from Apollo Records is a kind of crude, unsophisticated, technical product, but we get some singing that could move mountains.
I'm going outside, seeing it beautiful. March all around, gonna do. Gonna walk, never get tired. Go for life, Lord, will never falter. I'm gonna move up a little higher. Gonna meet old man Daniel.
An obscure Chicago DJ with an eclectic taste and an unconventional style would soon transform her life. This rare recording of her voice attests to her new friend's role in Mahalia's approaching international fame.
Well, Stud is such a fine man, you know, and I suppose some of you wouldn't have known about Mahalia Jackson if it had not been for Stud Terkel.
It was 1945, 46. I'm in this record shop, and the clerk worked for Downbeat magazine. He said, "I want you to hear this recording." Here's a turntable. He puts it on, and I hear this voice. And as she sings and soars, that voice, the richness, higher and higher, she moves on up a little higher. I thought of Caruso, Enrico Caruso, because Caruso had that quality that the most gifted have, the rare ones. He reaches a certain point, you think that's as far as the human voice can go, and he goes just further. Well, that was Mahalia.
Within 4 weeks of his broadcast, 50,000 copies sold. Terkel played the record till the grooves wore out, and he promoted her everywhere he possibly could.
And we'd be walking along the street. He says, "This is Mahalia Jackson." And the people say, "So?" And he would get mad. "Well, what do you mean? You don't know Mahalia Jackson? That's the greatest gospel."
Apollo begged their factory to increase their output. In an era where 100,000 copies was huge, her record would ultimately sell over 1 million copies. Apollo's sales hit $300,000. The connection to mobster Al Capone's protégés assured that the Chicago Mafia-owned jukeboxes offered Mahalia's song. Soon the underworld's network carried the devout Christian singing nationwide. Promoters cozied up to her from all over, but Mahalia was older and wiser.
There was a practice among those promoters to take the money while you're singing the last half and skip out of town. I know that sounds absolutely awful, but it's true. She had a very slick habit of demanding her money halfway through the concert, so that if you didn't pay her at that time, she said she wouldn't finish the concert.
Harlem's famed Apollo Theater begged in vain for her to sing nightclub pieces. Most dogged of all was black DJ and promoter Joe Bostic.
When he decided that Mahalia should be opened up to a white following, which frankly she didn't have at first, he went into Carnegie Hall, and of course you go to a concert at Carnegie Hall because in those days it was good.
For once, Mahalia felt overwhelmed. In 1950, Carnegie Hall was for classically trained white musicians. Since the age of 4, Mahalia never been shy to sing at a moment's notice in front of anyone. But now she admitted she was afraid. At least her longtime accompanist and friend would be with her.
Well, Mildred Falls was a wonderful accompanist for Mahalia. They understood each other so well, and she had that rolling gospel thing going beautifully. She was as good a gospel pianist as I've ever heard in my life.
The opening act was the Ward Singers, setting the stage for the other gospel stars. Through force of will or sheer reputation, Mahalia would end the concert.
I don't think people knew that Mahalia was competitive, but she was. There were these cutting contests in concerts. Who was going to take the house? Who would have the most people fainting? Who would have the most people shouting? And of course, people fought for places on the program. The audience was half black and was half white. As Mahalia started to sing, the black people started talking back to her. Sing, Haley. Amen. Hallelujah. And then as the spirit got high, they stood up right during the singing and they began to get happy. A critic who covered the concert had never seen a gospel concert before. He reported in the New York Times, and it was so funny because he'd never seen, as a matter of fact, he said, nothing in my puritanical background had prepared me for this kind of reaction.
The show broke all attendance records. Following her success at Carnegie Hall, Mahalia sailed to Europe in 1951. In Paris, she received 21 curtain calls. In Holland, Belgium, Denmark, and Germany, they couldn't understand a word, yet went wild. But she received a cool reception at London's Royal Albert Hall. She'd given a poor performance, telling no one about the acute pain she was suffering. At the University of Chicago, doctors discovered tumors caused by a slow but incurable disease. Before an emergency hysterectomy, she asked for a reading of Psalms 27. Mahalia's voice did eventually return to full form, but the surgery deprived this great lover of children from the ability to ever bear her own, a loss she found difficult to accept for the rest of her life.
Through the rain, go your
this point, Mahalia was making maybe $750 per concert. She had to pay Mildred Falls, her accompanist, but that would still leave her about $500 left over. That was a great deal of money, and you could do quite a lot with it. So you tended to show your wealth by your house and your Cadillac and your furs and your clothes, which was a big thing among gospel singers. And Mahalia was the queen, so she showed off a little bit.
Dinah Shore became the first TV star to insist that her network, CBS, enter into a contract with Mahalia to appear on her show.
They bring in a white quartet. They bring in these white pianists and these organists. They bring in strings, and it's like having 1,000 people play Happy Birthday. The song is too simple to have that many people, and it just took, Mahalia had to struggle against all of these forces to try to get that message through, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't.
Las Vegas offered $25,000 for one night. Well, there's nothing wrong with your nightclub. It's just a peculiarity of me, she said in declining. But Mahalia became a staple on TV, reaching her biggest audiences while singing under very awkward musical constraints.
As a young singer, not a young singer, a middle-aged Negro star. She's acclaimed as the greatest gospel singer in the country. On 3 occasions, she came into New York's Carnegie Hall. By herself, packs the place. So tonight, we are going to present this New Orleans singer. Her name is Mahalia Jackson. She's going to sing for you a gospel song, These Are They. Here is Mahalia Jackson. So let's have a nice welcome for her, would you?
Was fascinated by the fact that white people found her singing interesting. When she really wanted to have church, she would get a black audience because you don't have to explain things to black folk when you're singing gospel.
She was able to capture the pathos, the intimate feeling, and convey it, and then live and sing true to it.
Executive Mitch Miller at CBS's giant Columbia Records took notice and made a staggering offer, $50,000 a year, guaranteed for 4 years. Mahalia left a very bitter Apollo behind. She saw Columbia as a vehicle to the truly wide audience that still eluded her. Riding atop this international media empire, Mahalia would work with Columbia's legendary jazz producer, George Avakian.
I wasn't especially interested in the genre. I wanted to cover all aspects of music other than classical opera. And the idea of gospel music had not specifically come to my mind, but I don't think anybody ever made contact the way Mahalia did. She was so totally wrapped up in her performance. She would close her eyes and it was perfectly natural. It wasn't anything put on.
Oh,
It may have looked easy, but the musical taste of black America often repelled or even frightened white Americans. Yet she was determined to win them over. When executives sent her tape to William Paley, president of CBS, he immediately called Mahalia, offering her her own TV show. She had one condition: Studs Terkel for her host. But Senator Joseph McCarthy's hunt for communist sympathizers was casting a wide net of accusations across America. Studs was on political thin ice with these anti-communists to whom CBS paid heed. CBS finally okayed Studs' voice, but not his face. And they wanted him to sign a special document.
And it's a loyalty oath. I am not, nor have been, and I'm, etc. I said, well, no, I don't intend to sign anything like that. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid this is from CBS. I'm afraid you have to. Just a Mahalia's passing by. It was a casual rehearsal. She said, uh-huh. And she went, and I said, no. And she heard me, and she says to me, hey, baby. So she said, baby, is that what I think it is? I says, well, it probably is. Yeah, why? And you don't want to sign it? I says, no. Okay, let's rehearse. And the man says, well, Miss Jackson, pardon me, he don't have to do anything. Doesn't want. He said, no, let's rehearse. He says, Miss Jackson, this is from New York. She says, if he's not on the program, you're not going to have Mahalia Jackson. And you know what? That was the end of it. Nothing else happened. Because remember, the networks gave in, the agencies gave in, the sponsors gave in. Mahalia said, in effect, go to hell. And I thought that moment is a metaphor for everything. Mahalia showed far more character than Bill Paley, president of CBS, ever did.
With the incomparable Mildred Falls on piano, the show went on the air, highlighted not just by Mahalia singing, but the rapport between her and Studs Terkel.
Gospel songs are the redeemed songs.
The redeemed song.
Yeah.
You're not going to try to redeem me tonight.
If I could ever get you saved, it'd be all right.
If anybody can save me, it's Mahalia who can. And Mahalia says someone's try to force her to sing fast songs, you know, as though anybody can force Mahalia to do anything she doesn't want to do. If any lady has a mind of her own, it's Mahalia.
Let's do the Rusty Halo. All right. You know the first one? Rusty old halo, see white clouds.
She knew that like a song called Rusty Old Halo, which I thought was a very corny song. And Studs calls that a sweetening water song. Sweetening water song.
Oh!
You want
my record, man. What you
The show won huge ratings and a devoted audience, but again, Paley's fears intervened.
When I got a break on television and looked like somebody told the people, this ain't the thing to do, put a Negro on television. The sponsor had to cancel the program. And nobody on television ever got as much mail, and you know that I got. And finally, the next thing the man put me off.
The man was Paley. The year was 1955, and while Rosa Parks was refusing to go to the back of the bus, Paley's regard for white Southern audience reaction led him to cut back Mahalia's shows and finally cancel them altogether. She may have been a star, but more important to most Americans was the color of her skin.
One day in California, I was going to take Mahalia out to a very nice restaurant, and we were told that we couldn't be accommodated. I started to make a fuss about it. Mahalia tugged at my sleeve and said, George, forget about it. We're going to go back to the hotel and we'll have room service upstairs.
You white, you may not know this, but there can be one Negro where there's 50 white, and if another Negro come in, they go right to that Negro. They don't try to, they're not interested in that. Only thing we are interested in is equal rights.
Despite her fame, police would stop her Cadillac. It was here that the phone number of her friend Lorraine Garreau, a white woman, always came in handy.
I stopped in New Orleans one time. In her car, they said, who cars this? She says, my madam's car. Well, she knew Lorraine, and she told Lorraine what to say. And they call up little Ramey, say, oh, yeah, tell the maid to bring my call. She knew how to get by.
When I'm on the stage and on television and working with white people, they just hug me and love me and say I'm so wonderful and I'm so great. And then when I'm walking down the street like an ordinary citizen, I can't get a sandwich, I can't get a bottle of pop, I got to stand, I can't even get a cab. And I'm just the Mahalia Jackson that they got through saying how wonderful I am.
So when a preacher named Ralph Abernathy asked her to sing in honor of Rosa Parks, he began a brand new chapter in the life of Mahalia and the nation. Mahalia said yes immediately to Reverend Abernathy and began a series of concerts to raise bail money for jailed civil rights activists.
I couldn't say truthfully that I wasn't happy to be the first gospel singer to go into Carnegie Hall. Never thought they would, have me there. And to sing in Albert Hall in London, England, all around. I really appreciate that. But the joy comes when I usually go to the prisons and sing for those people that feel that they're shut off from the world. Those white people down south, fast as we raise the money, they just put the people in jail and consume that money back. They're smart. They intend to keep you down like that.
She knew about that from her recent treatment by Bill Paley, but her rising profile gave her a nationwide pulpit, and she spoke out.
Many artists become so protective of their image, they will not get close to direct action. They kind of sing away from the fight. She identified with the marching. She did not choose kind of distant relationship with our struggle for emancipation. She was in the thick of it.
In Chicago, she would publicly compare the life of a black American to the fate of a tied-down mule.
It's like I told you one time, after I come here and had been here so long and tried to get a break, I realized what it used to be when I used to see them put a stave in the ground and put a rope around the mule's neck. He could just go just so far, and he had to eat just around that thing. It's the same thing.
She decided to move beyond the unwritten boundaries. In 1957, she settled into a white Chicago neighborhood, setting off a massive uproar. In broad daylight, somebody shot out her picture window. Mayor Daley posted a guard in front of her house. The detractors and death threats faded away, and Mahalia pressed ahead with her mission to erase America's color line.
But you know something? Anytime God delivered the children of Israel and divided the water and let Moses lead the children over the Red Sea, there's a God somewhere. And no man on earth is able to keep people in bondage, because God created this earth for man. He didn't say, well, you're black or white.
She identified with Jesus' journey. That's why she was such a devout Christian, not just symbolic and hand-waving. Her sense of Jesus as emancipator and leader and God, one might call it a very clear theology.
And she found her Moses in an up-and-coming minister from the South who was creating a stir with his marches.
There's a young preacher there named Martin Luther King, who was just chosen as the spokesman. She's telling me this, and she's very funny. I know they're making trouble, aren't they, Studs? She knew I was involved in a number of things for which I got in trouble. I said, you bet they're making trouble. Oh, yeah, and how? I said, yeah, I'll go to sing. And then Dr. Abernathy asked me, how much do I charge? And she said to me, I told him, I don't charge the walking people.
Working hand in hand with Martin Luther King, and sometimes on her own, Mahalia raised money throughout the South by singing and even preaching for her cause.
The world is confused and frustrated all over. If it isn't one problem, it's another. And we must overcome. But we must come back to God. Everything gonna be all right one day. Everything gonna be all right one day. Everything gonna be all
believe it or not, wanted to be a preacher. She wanted to have her own church. This was highly unusual for women in the black church to be pastors. They could fill the pews, but don't go in the pulpit.
In 1958, she made her screen debut in St. Louis Blues alongside Nat King Cole. Meanwhile, a big artistic change awaited her. Under heavy pressure from Columbia as well as civil rights activists, she started singing in decidedly non-gospel venues. Mahalia appeared with Duke Ellington at the Newport Jazz Festival, referring to his band as a sacred institution.
Well, when she came out to sing, the audience went absolutely wild, and on the recording you can hear her say, "You make me feel like a star." But when she really wanted to sing, she would go to Chicago, and the great Mahalia Jackson would sing free on the program because she needed that infusion of the situation, of the people, of the communion, because right up until the end, she was still a Christian singing rather than a singer doing Christian stuff.
By now, Mahalia had transcended gospel music. She played herself in the Douglas Sirk classic, Imitation of Life.
For the Lord of the world, I'm going home.
The National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences wanted to recognize her, but had to create a new category. In 1962, they presented her with the very first Grammy for gospel. While buoyed by the recognition of her peers, she remained dismayed by our country's bigotry.
It's hard to describe. Whatever Jackie Robinson kind of meant to baseball, kind of real breakthrough of a sort, and Tiger Woods to golf, whatever many tremendous gospel singers, it was as if she broke a barrier and went to the general market, and she became a standard by which other gospel singers were measured.
I'm a woman of prayer, and I believe that prayer will change things if we get up and help ourselves. I'm not one of these type of people that tell God to bring me the mountains and I got my good hands and feet and don't get up and walk to it.
She was not on the soapbox. I happen to like the soapbox. I think we need more soapboxes. We don't have enough of them. But Mahalia took the very fact that she was at that rally, the very fact that she was down in Montgomery to do it pro bono, because it was her people, herself.
Dr. King wanted to march in Chicago, but the National Baptist Convention, local preachers, and the head of the NAACP were afraid of inciting trouble. Yet Mahalia hung on to the idea of throwing a fundraising concert on his behalf.
Dr. King could see her name on the program. He knew it was credible. He knew her presence represented for him joy. He could always call her directly. He would call Mahalia. She would call him at home.
And she'd always say, "We need a deliverer. And Dr. King is going to deliver us."
Mahalia's mission for nationwide social rejuvenation next brought her to a watershed event in U.S. history with the Great March on Washington, August 27, 1963.
The huge crowd was there around the reflecting pool, and hundreds of thousands. A marvelous moment. She wore a new hat with flowers. Some helicopter or something, a buzzing noise was made. And a machine, it was just accidental, I think. And she just looked up, and she just outsang that machine.
Oh, Ben Duke long, and I've been scorned.
He sang, "I've been buked and I've been scorned." And now that was a strange selection for Mahalia. Number one, it had no pulse. It didn't have a beat. But when Mahalia began to say, I've been buked and I've been scorned, children, I've been talked about as sure as you're born. And those people had come there to say, we've been buked. The place went absolutely wild. And it set it up so that when Martin ended that speech with, I have a dream that I'll no longer be rebuked, oh, it was really something.
Just how long they've been treating me wrong.
Mahalia had to come back and sing, and then she sang How I Got Over.
Well, soon as I could see Jesus, the man that died for me, the man that bled and suffered, you know he hung on Calvary. And I'm gonna thank him for how he taught me. I'm gonna thank God for how he taught me. Yeah, thank God I kept me. Oh, I'm gonna thank him for he never left me.
Now, Martin Luther King said to Mahalia Jackson, Haley, if I go before you, I want you to sing that precious Lord, take my hand at my funeral.
God been so good to me.
Her whole life was devoted to her religious beliefs and her church, and of course the civil rights movement.
Her efforts in civil rights were dealt a staggering blow on Friday, November 22, 1963. She walked into New York's Knickerbocker Hotel in time to see the shocking images from Dallas. President John F. Kennedy, the civil rights movement's most powerful ally, was gone.
I may not know.
Even as the world reeled in shock, new violence raged against innocent blacks all over the country. Mahalia felt their pain.
Down south where I was raised at New Orleans, Louisiana, and they would go off, these rich white people, and leave their children in my hands and love their children with all my heart. And the day they can take these little bit of black relatives of mine and throw water on them and keep them out of school, this is pretty hard.
She sang and spoke with such passion that Dr. King relied on her more heavily than ever. She was living out her dream, and her private life was changing too. She had been seeing a handsome studio musician, Sigmund Mentors Galloway. Although Galloway was charming and sophisticated, Mahalia knew that marriage to a famous woman was difficult for any man. After much indecision, she married him in a hasty ceremony.
Well, you know, people have a way of wanting to be protective of their star, their celebrity, to the point of meddling. You have to give people the room and the freedom to make their own choices, and he was her choice, and they had a great relationship, really.
The marriage also brought refreshing new pleasure for the gospel star, Mentor's little daughter, Sigma.
I think she would like to have had children. Her second husband had a young daughter, and she actually left her in her will for several $1,000s.
With career and family in place, Mahalia's life achieved a sort of normalcy. Exactly who Mahalia Jackson had become, though, was now an issue. Breaking her vow to sing only gospel, she did show tunes. They became instant hits.
I will say that you would find most singers making light of the fact that Mahalia was a financially successful gospel singer. People make fun of this, but when Mahalia died, she left something for her work. And she would hold on to a penny until you grabbed it away from her.
She had an idea of Mahalia Jackson Foundation. She had that in mind a great deal for young kids, ghetto kids and others, to get a break at it, life.
They look at their mother and father washing and ironing and working, trying to send them to school. And you know, a child from the age of 4 or 5 years old get this inferior feeling.
She herself had left that painful feeling far behind. But now, with her explosive fame and fortune, she suffered in a very different way. The superstar's non-stop travel tested her seriously overweight body's capacity to fight the new sarcoid tumors growing inside, and her hectic schedule left her with little chance to visit with old friends and fellow musicians like Harry Belafonte.
I think she missed the camaraderie because all she had was her accompanist. And that's a rather solitary life. So she missed hanging out.
And her second marriage was suffering. Galloway's own career languished, and he felt lost. Though an accomplished studio musician, he had focused his energies on her, slowly losing heart in his own future. In one magazine, he described her friends as hangers-on and sponges. He embarrassed Mahalia by serving liquor in the presence of ministers. Worst of all, he wanted her to leave her old circle behind and rub shoulders with elite blacks and whites. Their squabbles filled the papers. The judge refused her demand to evict him. Galloway's request for a jury trial backfired, and the jury decided in Mahalia's favor.
He, too, wanted to stop work, and I think they eventually divorced because he was seeing some other women. So she did not have much success, but she would tease often like, with all these men here, I know I can find a husband.
Freed from her exhausting marriage, an energized Mahalia continued what she loved the most, singing the gospel. But on April 4th, 1968, her Moses, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was shot dead. He was only 39. Like many others, she never fully recovered from the tragic loss.
And she sang Precious Lord. It was very moved by that because they had set up a relationship, and when he died, there was just no question but she would go there and sing at that funeral.
Precious Lord, take my hand, through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Oh, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on.
The anguish of life without Dr. King was tempered when she reconciled with her ex-husband, Mentors Galloway. Mahalia continued singing and intensified her efforts to help young black children. But she also noted with great sadness the decline of the church in the black community.
In those days, the church meant a lot in black communities. The church was something that one could go to and be refilled, and they would leave with a joyful in their soul.
No singer had provided worshipers with as much spiritual inspiration as Mahalia Jackson, and yet, at the age of 58, She finally broke her ban on singing at a jazz festival and celebrated her good friend Louis Armstrong's 70th birthday by feeding him gospel lyrics as they sang in the pouring rain.
I was weak. I was down. Yes. You can keep me out tomorrow. Oh, please keep me. All wrong. Don't be satisfied at all. Yes, I'll be satisfied. And I walk. Just let me walk. It's wonderful, baby. It's wonderful.
In 1971, she took what would be her most triumphant tour ever. As one of the world's most recognized citizens and a living legend, the lady from a New Orleans shack entered giant stadiums from Paris to New Delhi, faced thunderous applause, then sang her powerful heart out.
Oh, while I'm down here praying, Lord, search my heart. While I'm down here praying, Lord, please search my heart.
Her performances became national events, eclipsing politics and war, language and taste, culture and religion.
Study one no more, ooh, study one no more. I ain't gonna study, you don't want no more.
A rare and simple covenant to sing straight from the heart allowed her voice to penetrate directly into the souls of her audiences. As vigorous as her spirit felt, her tumor-riddled and heavy body failed her daily.
One thing, I told you stop. Whew. Lord, rain all on me. I'm really working for the Lord.
The rigors of performing soon became mere exercises in fighting off the agony. The chronic pain left her short-tempered and impatient with the chaos and intrigue that inevitably surrounded the world-class entertainer's entourage. Her behavior struck many as callous and self-centered.
To a degree, she had perhaps worn herself out and didn't have the patience, and she had probably been wronged several times, as she was the first one to tell you how these things work.
Give me some more. Stop it. Well, I work for the Lord tonight, truly. That's right. Again? Go ahead, Gwen, out there. You and Charles go play something.
And she'd also had a heart attack, a couple of them, and many people say that she was no longer the same person, that she had become a star.
Performing for adoring fans was Mahalia's temporary medication for her pain and suffering.
On earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace all day, and let it begin.
How do you feel?
Just a little tired. I feel all right.
Charles, go get a doctor.
I don't need no doctor.
She was breathing like this My mother was a heart patient, so I know what happens there with the breath and Mahalia would. But then she'd go out on stage, and you couldn't tell this, and I know how that. And then when she comes back, she would suffer for it.
Get a doctor.
Though only 59, she collapsed backstage in Germany and had to be evacuated home. She almost died. Get well cards from all around the world helped brighten her recovery. Soon after that close call, there began a string of unique honors she had never dared dream for. In 1971, Mahalia was well enough to receive an honorary doctorate of music from the City University of New York. Her delight over this recognition provided a temporary distraction from her failing health, her weight problems, and her newly diagnosed diabetes. One doctor told her she needed a psychiatrist. Another doctor was actually a reporter in disguise.
She was really all right, I thought, you know, go get my clothes and coming home. And before I could get to the house, and by the time I got to the house, I heard on the radio, Mahalia Jackson is dead.
It was January 27th, 1972. Mahalia was only 60. Mourners converged from across the country and around the globe, far too many to fit in her beloved Greater Salem Baptist Church. Her preacher, Reverend Leon Jenkins, held a wake there in her honor, with a crowd spilling onto the street. Her Bible lay open at Psalms 20. A crowd of 10,000 at the Airy Crown Theater comforted each other. Mahalia's friend, Aretha Franklin, sang at the funeral. Dozens of cultural figures paid their respects, and her great friend, Studs Terkel, delivered a moving eulogy. Her hometown of New Orleans held a second funeral. Her body lay in state, probably the grandest funeral ever given an American private citizen.
Well, I told Mahalia once, Mahalia, if you die before me, please, put in a word for me, reach down and pull me up.
Reaching down and pulling up the broken-hearted remained her gift and her goal, from riverfront shacks to European concert halls.
And in a sense, she represented black people. All Joe Louis, Lena Horne, Pearl Bailey, Ralph Bunche, Martin Luther King, all of these people represented black folk, and therefore we were very proud when they presented themselves as upstanding and successful. It inspired other people as well.
All the artists that I worked with, Mahalia and Louis Armstrong, were the most real people that I knew. Warm, loving, wonderful. And that was Mahalia. She was what you saw and what you heard.
Though visited by adversity, racial hatred, failed marriages, and a body racked by pain and suffering, Mahalia never lost her trust in the methods of her God and in the basic dignity of mankind.
Mahalia Jackson, you know, meant everything to me. If it wasn't for her, I'm sure I wouldn't be the person that I am today. 'Cause she was there for me when there was no one else.
Her legacy still opens hearts and joins together the souls of those who hear her sing.
But knowing Mahalia and the richness of her voice is one of the key experiences of my life.
So when you combine preparation and turning adversity into advantage with all that talent, you come up with something called Mahalia Jackson, and it lit up dark places. It warmed up cold places. It helped to change America for the better.
Like another friend of mine in New York said, when you like them sweet and soft, they call you square. So tonight I'm going to sing another little bounce one because I don't believe anybody here tonight is a square. I wonder how many of you know this particular song. I think everybody in America knows this song. Down by the riverside. You know, a lot of time I forget the words. The reason why I keep Mildred so long, she thought of my mouthpiece, she thought to say so. I said, well, how did that song go? She said, well, so-and-so, because, you know, I forget the word. So now you might be like me. So what is the first word, Mildred? Oh, yeah, I'm going to let on my sword. See, you remember that? All right. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Whoa. Down by the riverside. Yeah. Down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Yeah, study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ooh, is that wonderful?
Well, Mahalia's pretty certain now Chicago's going to have 300 Baptists more tonight.
You make me feel like I'm a star.